Okay. I'm seeing more of the people are signing in now. Okay, since this is for a lunch seminar, we better start on time so that everyone can take a break and then have the lunch and then move on to the afternoon. Hello, everyone. I am Florence Chan, President of AIA Hong Kong. Thank you for joining us for today's event titled From Digitalization to Effective Collaboration. In the next hour, we are bringing to you not just one, but 7 experts on different topics on BIM. The goal of this event is to give our community a breadth of the diverse topics on the subject of BIMs, so that in the future, we can also get a more focused discussion. The mastermind behind today's webinar is Dr. Calvin Kam, FAIA. He is the founder and also a CEO of Strategic BIM Innovation, SBI, BIM Score, BIM Supporters Group, and also planmeetdone.com, which you're going to hear more about it today. Calvin is a licensed architect as well as an engineer in the US. He is also teaching at the Stanford University. He also served many important roles in AIA National in promoting the technology in the industry, including co-chairman of the Center for Integrated Practice and the chairman of the Technology Knowledge Community. Calvin will be leading the presentation today, and he will do an introduction of the other speakers during the presentations. Next is our moderator of today, Martin Riese, AIA. He is an active member of our Hong Kong AIA chapter. He was the project director of the Hong Kong and London office of Fosters and Partners, a managing director of Gary Technologies BIM consultancy, and also a partner at the facade consulting firm Front. In addition, Martin has also been very engaged in the BIM industry in Hong Kong, and also as well as teaching at the various schools. So with that, I'm going to hand this event over to Martin to give a short introduction.
Thanks, Florence. I would like to give a brief context to this presentation. Since the early 1960s, the widespread adoption of the digitalization of the human experience has been bringing exponential change into all of our lives. Digital technologies are tools which bring with them the characteristic advantages and disadvantages of their implementation. Following in the footsteps of the military, aerospace, manufacturing, and automotive industry, the industry of the built environment has also adopted digital tools in an effort to realize the benefits made possible by these technologies. As architects, significant opportunities for improved collaboration, design, information management, and sharing have been realized by adopting collaborative digital technologies and working practices. Since the early days of the digitalization of the industry of the built environment, Dr. Calvin Kam and his team have been at the forefront of the research, development, and implementation of digital technologies and practices. It is a privilege to have the opportunity to listen to their presentations today. They will outline the industry's roadmap for the continued development and adoption of appropriate technologies that are helping to redefine and improve all aspects of collaboration, design, and delivery of the built environment. Calvin, over to you.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you so much, Florence, Martin, and the broader AIA community. Hello all, and good to see all the attendees and audience from Hong Kong or from around the world. So let me share my screen. All right, so the title of today's presentation, we are thinking of, rather than turning 1 or 90 minutes of just one monologue long presentation, we want to keep it short and keep it a little bit more upbeat and want to cover the topic on digitalization. Yes, we want to talk about building information modeling, but we also want to understand the important recipe that makes building information modeling work. And more importantly, it's about what value do we as architects or as professionals in the built environment can bring to the local and the global community. So it's very special. It's very special that we can all be united on a webinar from around the world, and understanding that in Hong Kong, that's an alarming pandemic still lingering in Hong Kong, just like the rest of the world. Yet with Zoom, we are in a safe environment and can today be with Florence and Martin and many of you. And Martin, wow, I think it may be 17 years, right, since we first met with one another. And really, it's about this digital practice that connect us together who are endeavoring for this industry. So thank you, Martin. And today, I'm also very excited to be joined by my fellow teammates joining us today from California, from Hong Kong, and from other parts of the world to all try to pitch and share with us some of our experiences over the last 10, 20 years in terms of digital practice. What also connected us has been AIA. I'm a proud member of AIA for maybe well over 1 or 2 decades and counting. And I was just looking up at some photos. Sorry, I need to somehow find a higher resolution ones. But that was Tony Ranella and myself. We were presenting on behalf of AIA Technology and Architectural Practice what used to be the AIA BIM Awards. And Martin, I think that's also how we got to know you. Jim, Martin, and Tony and I, we all contributed to AIA with BIM and what we now call the innovation practice. Personally, and part of our team, we also team up with our collaborators to go for design award. So what made us proud from over 10 years ago was that not only did some of the projects we did win an AIA design awards, but it also later on win some of the BIM awards and innovation awards. Today, we are practicing how to work effectively online. Even a couple of years ago, almost 8 years ago now, we were also teaming up with Walt Disney Imagineering and talk about the Disney Hotel in Hong Kong. And the title we came up was Fantasy Meets Science. It was also a podcast at that time. So AIA, we're also proud of how we are also always trying to work with new technology. So today, all the speakers, including myself, we represent Strategic Building Innovation, SBI, a little bit of our ongoing experiences. Over the last 20 plus years in over 20 countries, we always have been working with our partners, our clients, to look into how to bring BIM and digital practice into actual fair use for the built environment. Very often, the news and the soundbite tend to focus on the initial pilot, what was special about one pilot, about one headline. But at the same time, through our ongoing experiences, it's equally important to think about the scalability of any new technology, how we can learn from the global knowledge base, globalization of it. And beyond that, even though many of us architects tend to also bring the arts and the design perspective, it's important to not forget about the management science side of it. I noticed that this is for AIA Hong Kong. Our team also has been contributing to the digital roadmap, not only for well over 10 countries worldwide, but also for the digital journey of Hong Kong. We have been invited to advise the Hong Kong Housing Authority, the CIC, the Lands Department, the Development Bureau, and beyond on the ongoing innovation journey. So in this case, I would like to kick off with our 7-minute presentation by sharing with this audience. It's important to not only think about BIM as a technology, but what about the digital practice as a journey, and to understand the maturity progression along the way. Over 10 years ago, at Stanford University, Dr. Min Song and myself, we have worked with our team to come up with a 5-tier maturity model to pretty much say that, yes, we all can watch Hollywood BIM, we all can watch nice animation, but then are we bringing in a value? So we came up with the following proposition, that at the base level, we need to leverage technologies such as BIM, digital twins, to help us to visualize. Yet, on the other hand, is it something we can rely upon? Jim, with the AIA Documents Committee, has been thinking about the importance, the legality, how those BIM can become a legal documents for well over 10, 12, 15 years, Jim, to come up with different AIA contracts. So documentation is about reliability. But then beyond that, even though we can communicate, we can make it reliable, does the BIM and the digital asset allow us to do specific analysis or optimal integrated analysis? That's where we can consider multiple options. We can make a more informed decision. But when we are driving, even 12 years later on today, it's the stage where we can be much more autonomous and much more optimal with a digital approach. So also coming from Stanford University, where I continue to serve as an adjunct professor, even over 10 years ago, we have seen that research, and nowadays we see more in actual practice. Software can allow us to not only generate 1 or 3 alternatives for the clients to choose. We should leverage technology to allow us to generate tens of thousands, millions of examples and options so that we can let the computer to let us know what may be the optimal kind of like trade-off, so that we as designers and as professionals can make more informed decision and can pick some of the frontier of the design optimization and continue to refine it and continue to engage and use new technologies. And it's not about just making it cheaper or better. We believe that sustainability, cost, quality can all be optimized. If that may be the global vision of what technology can do, knowing this is also have a lot of Hong Kong audience, a couple of years ago, we were engaged by the Hong Kong Construction Industry Council to get a sense, a temperature read of how the construction industry in Hong Kong is picking up this technology. We were able to run one of the more rigorous research that we find globally by interviewing 734 organizations. And the response are as follows, that we find that even though we have seen good, what we like to call Hollywood BIM, but then a lot of the Hong Kong industry is still struggling to get the true value of the digital movement because of rigorous and kind of like a stubborn mindset. And the idea that we need to just comply and double handling either just the traditional 2D documents as well as the 3D environment, and also insufficient expertise. We may know how to build a BIM, but not really sure about how to bring value, how to simulate, how to automate or optimize that, which is why we recommended the Hong Kong community, building upon global experience, to bring more value-driven mindset, BIM-led workflow, start the design with BIM, and let all the 2D be coming afterwards, and to align the expertise beyond that. We also take a further look into the profile of the Hong Kong stakeholder. And interestingly, we find that actually government, public and private owners and bodies, developers and the like, are actually leading the BIM adoption in Hong Kong, whereas design consultants are mediocre, and then the construction industry was a little bit lagging behind. And we further see that comparing what we see in Hong Kong with the US, with global community, we see that a major 30–40% of the Hong Kong professionals are BIM laggers. They are not even jumping into the BIM. And then a majority of them are what we call typical practice, which means we want to promote them to more advanced, value-driven BIM-led workflow. And to give another analogy is that if the space shuttle is like the BIM and the digital workflow, just by fitting the space shuttle in a crowded Los Angeles street or on top of a Boeing 747 does not bring the true value of BIM. That's really what we see with double handling and a rigid mindset. Like what we have promoted with AIA 15 years ago about integrated project delivery. It's about aligning all the resources, mindset for value, just like a space shuttle, really aiming high and taking off. But the true value of BIM and digital workflow is to allow us to do something that we could not have done without it, not just to replicate the old process with better technology, but to allow us to do something like automation, like optimization, like digital twins. So that's what we find. And we further help the Construction Industry Council to benchmark Hong Kong globally. And you can see that we are a little bit mediocre if we take a look at that from the Hong Kong perspective. Over the years, we've also been benchmarking even the awards-winning projects in Hong Kong in terms of what we call the planning, the performance, the adoption of the technology score. And why scoring and measurements are important? For those in Hong Kong, we may recognize the West Kowloon terminus. A couple of years ago, our team was engaged to benchmark 6 high-speed train stations globally. West Kowloon, Beijing South, London St. Pancras, Paris North, Tokyo Station, and Berlin. We came up with an evaluation framework to look into what does it mean in terms of passenger experience, in terms of back of house staff, in terms of circulation, the journey. Oftentimes we may just see one rendering, one image, but does the passenger just get that perspective in their 1 hour journey in and out of the station? In short, we challenge the status quo of not just taking costs and construction time to be the only metric of how we evaluate how good or how bad or the size of a construction of a terminus. More importantly, we challenge the audience to think about societal impacts. What societal impacts, what connectivity do we bring with a major construction such as a major high-speed station? Finally, we have also been helping the Hong Kong Development Bureau to come up with a key performance indicator set to challenge all the public project officers to say that, yes, let's not only talk about the billions and millions of construction spending and whether they are using BIM or not, but it's important to ask what are the impacts from BIM. Globally, we have seen projects in US and many award-winning projects getting the AIA Innovation Award projects able to celebrate that they can get much fewer requests for information, much better design coordination, and much faster construction, much better safety and asset performance. And that's the idea that we want to bring. So with that as an opening, I would like to turn it over to John, who will then talk about one of the really fundamental of BIM is that we can bring the time access to it. John is our senior industry advisor. He has decades of experiences after his degree from MIT in construction, in innovation, and also bringing 4D practice globally. So John, thank you for joining us all the way from San Francisco.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. So please take over the screen also.
Right. Okay, is the screen there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thanks, Calvin. All right, good. So thank you very much, and it's an honor to be part of this panel to present. I'm going to present quickly a short overview of a topic called 4D phase planning. And I would say that as an introduction, that 4D BIM is probably not typically considered as a high priority in the design phase. And what I'd like to do in this presentation is broaden the perspective of 4D from its sort of traditional view to one that is considered more by architects and engineers. So what is 4D? First of all, I'd like to present sort of the driver for this, which is that construction is an expensive process, and basically everything that's designed has an associated sequence by which the components within the design are installed and built. So the design is a static entity in itself in terms of the facility, the building is, but in terms of the construction process, there is a sequence that goes into putting it together. And any inefficiencies in that sequence, which may be referred to by many as a program or a schedule, which is really a sequence of activities, any inefficiencies can lead to rework, delays, and potentially even safety risks. And in the case of rework and delays in particular, these are added costs to the owner that are typically decreasing the experience that the owner is having in the built environment process. So we want to improve that experience, mitigate any risks, mitigate delays and rework, and 4D is a great tool for that. So what is 4D? Basically what it is it's a combination, as it's implied by its name. 4D is really about adding the component of time to the BIM process. So we have BIM, which is a data-rich model, and we add the components of the activities that would be in the program. And this is done in various ways using software. And we also, to make the process more realistic, we will add components of equipment and temporary works and so forth, which are typically not included in the design BIM, which are very important in the process of construction. They take up space, they take up cost, and they present issues of conflict and congestion potentially that can delay the project. So an example of the output that comes from the software after the schedule is integrated with the model is shown here. This is a good example. It's a hotel project, and what you're seeing is the sequence of activities that are required to transfer that design into a built facility. And the visualization is really the key part of 4D. It brings all stakeholders and participants in the project together so that instead of having to understand how to read a line-by-line schedule, we can visualize this schedule in all possible ways to be able to make sure that we're building the project efficiently and safely. What does it mean to link the program to the BIM? Essentially, think of 4D as an integrator. It is not a design software, and it's not in itself a software that generates new parts of design, for instance. But what it does is it brings in components of design to an environment in the software that also brings in components of a schedule. And in fact, it can bring in components of cost and other data, but we'll keep it to model and schedule. It can bring in various types. Many of the software programs can bring in various types of data from various common programs. With SBI, we are very strongly involved in the open BIM environment that you will hear more about, which is based on IFC data. So bringing in IFC data, from my perspective, is a very important capability in order to maximize the value of 4D. And when we bring these softwares together, like you saw in the previous video, what we see is a visual presentation of the schedule. And that can include all types of activities like demolition, installation, temporary works, and even maintenance activities. And you can present the visualization in various ways using standard tools like a Gantt chart, or like shown here, the list of activities that are going on at any particular time. So as a project manager, if I'm interested in one particular day or one particular week, I can stop this movement and see what crews are working and what trades are working at that particular time. So what are the key goals for 4D? Quickly, from the perspective of design engineering and architecture, I would say one of the key goals is to guide the owner. So the phasing aspect of 4D can be used to help the owner understand the different aspects of the project that are inherent in the design to create that built environment from the design. A second key goal would be to de-risk the project. If we break up the design into parts and sequence them with time, we can get a better understanding quickly amongst the stakeholders if there may be areas of the construction that may impact existing operations, or if there may be areas that may create potential for congestion between major trades, or if there's any areas that may, for instance, say in an airport terminal, might be closing down certain revenue generating shops and so forth for periods of time that's not desirable. And ultimately, what we want to do is build the project virtually. Any construction that can be done on the computer is essentially done at zero cost and prevents the potential and mitigates the risk of costs that could be incurred in the field when work is delayed or rework occurs. So the last part of my presentation, I'll talk about the different phases of a project and how 4D can be used in those phases. Frequently, it's viewed as a tool that's used only in the later stages of construction, but that's really not the best way to use it. For instance, in the early stages of a project, 4D is a great tool for master planning. So when you're trying to make major high-level decisions using a high-level milestone schedule and review the basic logistics, it's a great tool for that. The second part would be to validate that master plan. So once the master plan is, you've come up with that, let's build the project on the computer and make sure there's no problems in that master plan that may lead to potentials and delays and risks. The third area is getting into more detail, later stages of project. MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing are typically high cost, high complex areas of the construction for most buildings. And 4D is a great way to master plan the MEP so that the trades can be categorized by certain colors and areas to make sure that the spacing of the trades is creating a good flow of work without congestion. And then we would want to validate the MEP, and that would require more detail in the BIM that's linked to a more detailed part of the schedule to then break up the work by contractor and actually plan the work, what we call workfront planning, in advance, nearly in advance of when the work is being done. So tools like pool planning can be supported by 4D. And finally, for the fit out and commissioning phase of the project, this is a great tool for reviewing with the owner early in the project how the project is going to be commissioned and handed over. And during the course of the project, there are some great tools that can be integrated with 4D. In this case, you see video cameras of progress at the job site being integrated with the 4D model. So you can literally visualize how well you're doing in terms of the actual performance versus the plan. So key takeaways quickly, I would say the first one, 4D does build the project virtually. So we're always thinking about construction no matter what part of the phase of the project we're in, and 4D is a way to construct the project on the computer. The second takeaway is it enhances collaboration and teamwork, and it doesn't do a good job or it doesn't get its full value if it's not used in a collaborative way. So 4D, especially with the visualization, is a critical and valuable way to improve collaboration from the project team. The third point is to think about construction as a mindset even in design, so that by phasing the project construction in the early stages of design, we can see if we're designing for the best constructability of the project. And finally, continue to use the 4D after construction starts so the actualization of the work can be compared to the plan. And if there are delays, those adjustments can be made more intelligently and decisions made more quickly in terms of corrections.
Thank you, John. So as we transition to Jim's screen, Jim, please go ahead. Let me also introduce Jim Bedrick. Jim, FAIA, has been a seasoned expert in the domain of construction and owner-driven BIM. And with the AIA, he has been a former chair of AIA Technology and Architectural Practice. He also served on AIA Board Knowledge Committee. And more importantly, he's also serving on AIA contract documents, all the AIA documents, and how to bring BIM and digital deliverable into it. Jim has been an expert. More importantly, Jim has been, I would coin, the grandfather of LOD today, everywhere in the world may hear about LOD, and Jim, it's a major person contributing to this even today. Jim. That's a mute of mic too. So as Jim is getting that ready, there you go, Jim.
There we go.
Yes, may need to go full screen again. Jim is going to talk to us about collaboration science. We all take for granted, especially during COVID, that it's important to collaborate. But have we been thinking about that just like a biologist, just like a scientist? So Jim, what can we learn from them?
Well, so thank you, Calvin. First of all, John just mentioned the importance of a mindset. The digitalization of design and construction provides a huge amount of tools that are extremely effective at supporting collaboration, but they don't do collaboration. They're tools, and tools don't work unless you have somebody skilled using them. So this piece of the presentation is about that mindset that helps us actually gain the benefit of these tools in collaboration. So design and construction teams are really diverse. They include a broad range, a huge range of knowledge, of skill sets, backgrounds, priorities, viewpoints, and so on. And this diversity can be an asset or a problem. I mean, it can simply cause conflict and gridlock, and everyone simply leaves the table in disgust, and we wind up with nothing. A little bit more cooperative team may present several ideas and may then pick one and run with it through voting or even something like coercion or something like that. And they may even add parts of other ideas to it. So in this case, we get either one part or possibly the sum of some of the parts. True collaboration, though, we get the ideas are combined, okay? So we combine these ideas into a new one that's better than any of the originals. And through that, we manage to get a whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. So why is this difficult? Why doesn't it just happen more often? The number one obstacle to it is defensiveness. When we hold an idea strongly and someone challenges it, we tend to get defensive. We see it as a threat. And that defensiveness then kicks us into a hardwired defensive mode. And the way this works is that at the base of the brain is this structure called the amygdala. And this controls our response to threats. Are we going to fight or flee, or are we going to cooperate? Now, the amygdala can make decisions on its own without the influence of the rest of the brain, but it's not very smart. And since its purpose is survival, it will err on the side of what we see as a threat. Now, the amygdala gets input through two neural pathways. One is direct, allowing the amygdala to make its own uninformed choice. And the other goes through our cerebral cortex, where we think about it and formulate a reasoned response. The problem is that even though this reasoned response may tell us to cooperate, the unreasoned response is stronger, it's faster, and it is directly linked to survival. So it is likely to win out, and we are likely to get into this defensive mode. The usual defense is to look for weaknesses in the other's ideas. We've all seen this in arguments where someone will present an idea. The other person says, no, you're wrong because A, B, and C. The first person comes back then with, no, you're wrong because D, E, and F, and so on. What's happening is that they are both looking for weaknesses in the other's idea. The problem here is that if we want to combine ideas, it's not going to do us a lot of good to find the weaknesses. we need to find the strengths in the other idea. So this is the collaborative mindset then, to weaken that direct response, direct input to the amygdala, strengthen the reasoned response, and develop a sincere desire to find the strengths in ideas we disagree with. Somebody says something, your immediate reaction is, well, gee, that's dumb. You have to think, well, this person probably isn't a total idiot. There's probably something good about this idea. We need to find it. Now, this mindset can take, since it really goes against a hardwired survival instinct, this mindset can take a lot of time and effort to develop. However, there is a way that teams can put this to work immediately, a very, very simple tool called the plus delta approach. So when we're commenting on an idea, a plus is something good about the idea, and a delta is something we would propose to change about the idea. So we set these rules for meetings. 1, all comments must be in a form of a plus or a delta. Secondly, anyone who wants to speak about an idea must identify a plus before they can propose a delta. What this does then is the requirement to find a plus first, that forces people to look for that strength in the other person's idea. And stating things as deltas rather than a negative helps show the way toward combining these ideas into something that's bigger than any of them at the first place. So in summary then, to gain the advantage of the diversity across a design and construction team, first, cultivate that collaborative mindset, the idea of looking for strengths in the ideas you may not agree with. And secondly, put that mindset to work immediately using this plus delta approach. And this then will enable teams to create solutions better than any of the original ideas that they started with.
Thank you, Jim. And next, we have another good longtime friend, colleague of ours, Tony. Tony, like Jim and I, also have served on AIA. Tony started his journey looking into architecture and computer science in the 1970s at Berkeley, and in the 1980s has been building some of the early form of AutoCAD integration to look into facility management. At AIA, Tony has served as a chairperson of the AIA Architecture and Technology practice, and along with Jim, myself, and many other good colleagues of ours have been promoting BIM and Innovation Awards. And 10 years ago, we were already trying out a different form of hybrid conference and the like. Now, in terms of now that we want to be collaborative, once we are more collaborative, once we recognize the pluses before the deltas, now we need to talk about building consensus. Tony, joining us from Berkeley, California.
Thank you, Calvin, and greetings all. Yes, Jim has given us some really good pointers for how we can collaborate together. One of the things we need to do as we collaborate together is to build consensus. So let's look at some ways that we can build consensus. Some of these you may know, and some may be a bit surprising. First questions are, what is consensus and how do we achieve it? For our purposes today, let's say consensus exists when teammates agree to support an idea or move forward with a decision. The selected option may not be everybody's favorite, but it should be a choice that has no major blocks to moving forward and something everybody can agree to support and further. So before we explore how to build consensus, let's consider what consensus is not. Consensus is not majority rule. Overruled teammates may have legitimate concerns that need to be addressed, or they may lack clarity on a proposal, Either of these situations is going to inhibit their ability to contribute to the team's success. Consensus is not just giving in to the loudest or least flexible voice. Teammates who are pressured or who just give up because they can't be heard are blocked from making their most meaningful contributions to team success. Creating environments of respect and trust empowers teammates to achieve more collaboratively than they're able to do severally. The first step is to be sure everybody's clear on the ultimate goals and is pulling in the same direction. In order to help do that, establish priorities. Define how success will be measured so that everyone can work together toward the same goal. Teams tend to pay attention and force their actions based on what is measured. So, what metrics really matter? A long clash report or a smooth project with minimal rework? Checking off many RFIs or reducing them to zero? Or quickly addressing the most critical issues to optimize project delivery? Keeping a regular, rigid meeting schedule or making timely decisions that don't need to be changed later on? If your answers are the ones shown in blue, and we really hope they are, then consider using some of the metrics that are shown here to make sure that the team understands what good looks like and stays on track. Teammates who lack information or are confused about how to proceed probably need your help. Support teammates with all the information they need in order to succeed in their roles. Strong teammates make strong teams. Once this foundation has been laid, then the team leader can support the team to define issues and requirements and draft proposals. Then poll the team to learn who can support the proposal, who has concerns or questions, or who finds the proposal unsupportable. If everyone agrees, then life is great. You can just document consensus and move on to the next issue. If there are questions or concerns, these can frequently be addressed by providing clarifications or making minor adjustments to the proposal to address the concerns and achieve consensus quickly in that way. If the proposal cannot be supported, then the team may empower a working group to develop an action plan with new solutions. Be sure to specify the requirements and set a due date. When completed, the working group can rejoin the broader team, and these new solutions can hopefully achieve consensus. But if agreement still cannot be reached, other steps may be necessary to achieve resolution. Let's consider three options. The first one is forming a panel of experts. Be sure that these people have the background information they need, including any concerns that were voiced during previous deliberations, so that these folks can put together a well-constructed proposal. Another option is to consider mediation. Trained mediators can often help teams find their way to consensus, even if the mediators are not subject matter experts themselves. Jim mentioned tools like Plus Delta. This is a really important way for people to learn to see the strengths in solutions that might not be their favorites in order to appreciate the value that they can bring. This frequently helps people understand the perspective of another person and can bring them into a better position to see eye to eye. Of course, it's also possible to escalate issues to senior decision makers, but be careful about this. This may be the least favorable option since these leaders may not have sufficient time to fully explore the proposals, and acquainting them with all the information necessary to make a good decision would likely require very large investment. Whichever method is used to reach resolution, be sure to document the decisions, the reasoning, and the expected next steps. Share these back with the project team so that they can mobilize to support this decision and move forward to take it on to success.
Thank you, Tony. So we do have 3 more themes coming up, but why don't we pause a little bit? Martin, Florence, what do you think? Have we seen any questions from the audience, or what would be your thoughts or questions for the panelists?
Well, this is so far going really well. It's like a life lesson rather than just about technology. I loved it.
Indeed, that's what we find is that, yes, we are trying to come up with what is a good technology recipe, what is a good BIM score, what is a good digital journey. But we continue to come to the answer that technology is the final piece. The recipe needs to have good objectives, good metrics, good plan. You need to have the process. You need to have really, most importantly, where we are addressing, it's the people side. It's the people side. Way too often, as we spend time in Hong Kong and many other parts of the world, what Tony mentioned in terms of just getting the escalated, just saying no to something, is still something that we see, we observe day in and day out. And without those recipe, we are just going to suppress what BIM can do for us. And even very often, we do see 4D all the time, pretty animation, pretty fly through. What John showed may not be the most prettiest, kind of like Hollywood 4D, but the question is that what kind of constructability, what kind of resource planning we can do. So I think that those are something that we want to promote. Martin, from your decades of experiences, how does that maybe resonate with you and your experiences?
Well, thanks for the great presentations. I think it's really very important to address the behavior of the individuals, because the things that you've discussed, we've all seen in our experience. I guess one of the questions I had, that's so complete and comprehensible. It's a question that's maybe slightly outside of what was presented, but as you say, from experience, one question I had for you is to what degree procurement would have to change to optimize the adoption of these technologies and working practices. What I mean is everybody's doing their job well, let's say, and yet there is a structure in place about how we procure the built environment that may be based on older working methods. What do you think about how that might change?
That's a global issue, because without good procurement alignment, we are only betting on good faith and just friendship and just teamwork, which in some cases may not be the only incentive. So Jim, would you like to talk more about what AIA contract documents and what Jim, Tony, we see from IPD approach are advocating?
Sure. I think, Martin, probably the key is, and I'm sure you've run into this, but quality-based selection or qualifications-based selection of design firms, design services. And in essence, this is a process where firms will answer a request for qualifications and list their qualifications, and then the owner or the procurer of these services will make a selection based on these qualifications without consideration of the fee. Once they make a selection, then they sit down and negotiate with that firm, and if they can't come to an agreement on fee, they will then go to the next one. But this sidesteps this idea of the low bid to get the project where you wind up getting the person who, or the firm who missed something and so bid too low. Does that answer at least part of the question, Martin?
It is part of the question, but I think, I suppose it's a broader philosophical question, which is that if we were the aerospace industry and we were building an airplane, we would experience still a pretty large and diverse industry, but much more unified. You know, the design department would be more integrated into the overall design and procurement process. Even your response assumes this kind of compartmentalization of procurement into things like an architecture design office. And yet the technology with the single source of truth and the fact that everybody has access to the information might lead us to perhaps integrate further or unify, kind of like design build, but even more. But it's a question that's not here yet. It's something that is possible, but I'm wondering what you think about that.
Well, I think it is here in a lot of cases. The Tony and I went to Australia. Gosh, when was that, Tony? In the
15 years ago,
something like that.
2005.
2005. They were working on a project, on a project delivery method called Project Alliance, right? That became in the States integrated project delivery. And there are many flavors of this, but the essence of it is that everyone, including the key subcontractors, and that is really important. The key trade contractors that are actually putting the building together are involved from the very start of design. The contracts in the States forbid the architect from the standard design owner architect agreements, forbid the architect from specifying or even getting into means and methods, construction means and methods, which if you think about it is a little ridiculous. If you're designing something, you should probably be considering how it's going to go together. So whether it's design build or progressive design build or integrated project delivery, one of those, the key part is to get those key contractors and the ones who are actually going to build the project, to get them into the design process early with some skin in the game.
And that notion about getting skin in the game, not just charge based on fee or just based on a stipulated lump sum, it's really where I noticed that globally, whether we're talking about NEC or IPD or just more kind of like rethinking about procurement to really make it more integrated, like with design thinking and the like. So indeed, as Martin mentioned, there's so much we can learn from manufacturing, from aerospace, noting that they are not perfect. Just look at our global supply chain, just look at car, look at plane today, they have the challenges. But our industry, it's even worse and still has so much to pick up. So we'll circle back to the border scheme of OpenBIM and OpenGIS towards the end. Maybe I may suggest that we then invite Kayla. Kayla, joining us from Hong Kong today to share about what may be the best practice of productive meetings and effective collaboration. And please, for all the audience, keep jotting down your questions. Feel free to post it on the chat window. And we also have budgeted time to have further chat after this. So thank you, Martin, Florence, Jim, Tony, and team. Kayla. So Kayla, please also turn on your mic.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kelvin. Okay,
hold on, we no longer see a screen. We saw a screen just, there you go. Yes, good.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Kayla, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelvin, and thank you all my teammates. So previously, Tony and Jim mentioned about the collaboration science, how we talk about pluses and deltas approach. And now we try to look at meetings and collaboration in another angle. We try to look at the journey of meeting participants and the meetings and the angle of meeting organizers, and what is the best practice of having a productive meetings and effective collaborations. I think everyone here would agree there are way too many meetings nowadays. According to an article from Harvard Business Review in 2017, CEOs spent more than half of their time in meetings, while the subordinates would have to attend at least 2 meetings per day. So there are lots of meetings, but what are the ways to improve our meeting effectiveness? In the past, it may be easier because we tend to have more in-person meetings. We notice or we would understand their engagement level, their participation level by looking at their body language, their facial expression, something like that. But in the past 2 years, as you would also understand, pandemic is all over the world. The COVID situation is even getting worse in Hong Kong in the past 1 or 2 months. So we are now evolving towards a hybrid mode of meetings. Some people may have meetings in person in the meeting room, while some of them may go through online conferencing platforms like this one, the Zoom, Google Meet, and Teams. So it creates a challenge for everybody. So I'm going to share with you some meeting management tips when you plan, participate, and follow through the meetings. Before the meetings, we should have a clear setup and some guiding principles. Let me select some of them and go through it one by one. First of all, we should encourage team source and identify which topics will require a subject matter expert and which decisions will need to be made. We should set a duration for each topic and it will help the team to stay on track and in what order you need to address them. We should also ensure that there's a lead to carry out the discussion for each topic. Like this, yeah. And when all participants understand their roles, they would know the expectation from them. Like some of the meeting organizers should contribute to the read ahead materials related to their respective topics. For example, prepare some read ahead PDF or PowerPoint that it will facilitate everyone to engage in the meeting. And everyone would get up to speed and be ready for the discussion during the meeting. When we are in the meeting, during the meeting, actually facilitation and documentation are important. It would be good, like what Tony has mentioned, it would be good to link important information between meetings and make these references available during the current section. Sometimes people may forget forget what have been discussed and the decision made in the previous meetings. We have limited bandwidth in all of our brain. So people tend to forget something from time to time. So they may spend more time on discussing the same thing or looking for the information in the past meetings. So easy access to past discussions will be beneficial to meeting participants, and it will reduce the time required to search for such information. Therefore, they can reserve more time for the team to deliberate and arrive at a decision together. We should also clearly document the decisions, the discussions, and agreed commitments for follow-up. And we should ensure that every unresolved decision has an action, and every action should have a lead and a due date. And before we conclude the meeting, we have to summarize any decisions made, remind the team of any postponed agenda items, and we should review the established next steps so that everyone would on the same page. They would know what they have to do after the meeting. Yeah, and then after the meeting, we not just stop there. We have to manage the follow-ups. We have to ensure all the leads of those actions are aware of those actions and they are being assigned to them. We have to check the follow-through progress of those actions. For example, what actions are overdue, what actions are postponed to another due date, and which actions are being completed maybe on time or ahead of the due date. We have to track all the latency, the average postponement, and the overall commitment reliability. So that a clear and a transparent progress report could provide visual into the workloads and in the distribution across the team. And with this clear picture, it will open up the opportunities to delegate tasks, leading the team on a path to success. Like this one, so everyone would have completed the actions on time in an ideal picture. So here are some of the quick tips for you to manage your meetings, like when you join the meetings or ahead of the meetings and after the meetings. So I think all these tips may be beneficial to all of you. And actually, nowadays in the market, there are many platforms or softwares that could help you to follow those best practice. Like our SBI has also developed our own tool to help manage and guide our meeting progress. So if everyone has any comments to share or do you have any questions to ask us, please feel free to reach out to us after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So for now, we've been talking about the importance of the people part. People, we need to be incentivized, we need to collaborate. Now, the next part, we would also like to then come back to the whole, with AIA Hong Kong, we do see a lot of real estate development and planning process. So now let's look at big data. How do we look into data set? Hong Kong has a lot of amazingly sky high real estate sales transaction, maybe one of the highest in the world. But what we can just say, oh, how crazy are the number? But at the same time, what can we learn from looking into those numbers? So next will be Dr. Joy Lee, who will be sharing her research at Hong Kong University into how to make sense of all those consumer behavior. And then we'll end that with also kind of like factoring those traditional process with the BIM world, how we can integrate BIM and GIS in a digital world. So Dr. Joy Lee.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Kevin, for introduction, and thank you, Florence and Martin. I would like to share with you the real estate development and consumer behavior in Hong Kong. I guess some of you are not from Hong Kong, so maybe this flow chart may be of interest to you. For Hong Kong, we have land acquisition from both public and private source. For public, the major land supplies from Lands Department, and for private, the developers will do redevelopment or they will acquire agricultural land. And next, we need to do the planning. That is where we spend much time on it. And especially for you, most of you are architect, you may need to help the client to do the planning application, things like that. And that's where the BIM and digitalization, the technical tools that can help us to improve the process and to make better decisions. And I'll go into a little bit deeper into this one later. And the third step is construction, and many of our teammates already share their suggestions on how to ensure a more cost-effective and more timely construction with the good use of BIM and digital technologies. And we all always say that we need to have the end in mind. So why are we building so many good architecture, good buildings? Because we need to sell them, we need to lease them to those end users. So we also need to have the end in mind to how to have a more transparent sales and more transparent lease to those end users. And in Hong Kong, I guess it's a little bit different from other places in the world because we have the ordinance launched in 2013. And after the sales and leasing, we also need to do property management, and this may take, say, 30 or even 40 years of time. And we also have a related ordinance in Hong Kong. So I'll go to more details in the planning part. So for planning, there are mainly three steps. First is we need to go through the outline zoning plan. And if you just follow the zoning plan, if you just follow the plan that is a statutory requirement, then things would be quite easy. But if you need to do something like we call column 2 use, or there is some rezoning requirement, then things will be quite complicated and may take like maybe decades or even several generations of people to go through those planning applications. And then we need to go through the land lease with the lands department. On the left-hand side is the land lease in earlier years, and the requirement will not be very complicated. Usually it will mention non-offensive trade clause. And for the right-hand side, it's the land lease nowadays. Typically, we will see building covenants, the users, and how the building shall be used, like say a residential purpose, or it can be some shops. And that's where BIM can help us. And our teammates also mentioned that we can make good use of some automated calculations to calculate the use of the building, so as to make better decisions on how the building can be used, and also the gross floor area, what area shall be used for which type of use. And also the height will also be required under the land lease. There are actually also other requirements in the land lease, and I may not cover it here in details now. And the third step is buildings department. There are several regulations, ordinance, and for architects who mainly needs to review the practice notes for authorized persons. The practice note keeps updating to follow the latest regulations and guidelines. For example, a very good example is in Hong Kong, in the old days, the balcony and the utility platform, they can be combined. But after a while, people think those two cannot be combined. So those two are separated. In between, there need to be 1 meter and 50 centimeters distance. But recently, another update is the balcony and UP need to be combined again. So that's how Hong Kong, the regulations and practice are evolved over time. So as I mentioned, we need to have the end in mind. So in 2013, the new ordinance came into effect and have very detailed requirements on sales brochure, price lists, sales arrangements, and also register of transactions. The idea is to make the entire residential market more transparent, so that the end users, they can make a better decision with all the information on hand. And for practitioners, they need to pay very detailed attention to the sales brochure. On that, one major change is we need to use sellable floor area. And with the use of BIM, it will be, and the entire process will be more smooth when you go through the building plan submission with lands department and buildings department, etc. So as mentioned by Dr. Kelvin Kim, I did a research when I was in Hong Kong U, and data was collected during 2013 to 2016 when the ordinance was first came into effect. I collected 165 first-hand projects and also over 600,000 second-hand data sets in Hong Kong. And I did 2 stages of research with those data sets. And the conclusion I find is actually the buyers in Hong Kong are quite rational. So here, for example, when I say the building, this unit is called $100, for those developers, they will say, actually the list price is 100, but the selling price I will give you 20% discount. So it then becomes 80%. So it then becomes $80. So for the end users, for the purchasers, will they consider 100 as benchmark? And then they found, well, it's now 20% discount, or they will just regardless about the 100, and they only consider $80 as a benchmark. So the reality is they will only care about the $80. They will not care about the marketing strategy made by the developer, saying that, oh, originally it cost 100 and now I give you 20% discount. They will not really care about that. So that's why I say Hong Kong buyers, they are quite rational. They only care the actual price. And also, one thing is a little bit special in Hong Kong is I see the stamp duty rebates. I didn't really see that in other markets in the major economies in the world. And this allows the developers to exercise discrimination on those purchases. And this is actually really useful to improve the sales outcome. And also for the entire market momentum, if the market momentum is good, then the purchasers would be quite confident to get into the market and purchase a unit. So that's all my introduction and my sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. So in her research, looking into not just as simple as 100 to 80, but like all the different rebates, all the different mortgage, all the different kind of like premium that developers have different tricks and different marketing scheme. And Dr. Lee was able to go through all of them and peel all the onion and conclude that the buyers in Hong Kong are very rational, building upon some economist model. Dr. Lee talked quite a bit about this process involving lots of data, but also with the building department, with the lands department. And our team has also been serving the development bureau, the lands department, and been also consulted by the buildings department. And Dr. Min Sung also got his PhD. In his case, we probably know each other for over 10 years at Stanford University, has practiced globally, and now also trying to bring some open BIM, OpenGIS integration, not only for Hong Kong, but also hopefully with a global significance. So Dr. Sung.
Thank you, Kelvin. Oops. Okay, digital twin with open standards here. So when it comes to a city, and here I'm not really talking about a single building or complex. I'm talking about entire city.
Sorry, can you check your microphone? At least I don't. Or was it just me?
I can hear. I can hear.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. So when you think about city, not talking about a building, these are some of the platforms that you will see around the world today. But one thing you will kind of notice here is that most of these platforms do not, use what we call BIM. So they use first OpenGIS, formats like CityGML and not IFC. And they are more focused on using polygons or meshes because they are light in terms of streaming the data. And also they are more focused on modeling not only the buildings, but the terrain, landscape, and city furniture, and also the outside, the skin, exterior of the building, as opposed to inside of the building. But what SBI in Hong Kong was Landsea also, but we also have partners in Europe. And so what SBI has been working heavily on is trying to create a city platform that kind of brings in BIM in addition to that type of OpenGIS. So in this case, especially IFC that you see here. So if you see this, you have OpenGIS on one side, but you also have IFC OpenBIM on the other side. And here we are trying to merge these two together into a single server and provide the users this data as a service using Cesium, which is also open solution. So what you see here, the three key components are all kind of open solution and standards. So then the question is, why are we doing that? Why are we not just using, OpenGIS or CityGML like other cities have been doing? It's mainly because CityGML alone doesn't have that rich semantic that you see here. So that BIM or IFC, what type of floor it is, what type of slab it is, and you have different properties associated with that. But if you see CityGML or OpenGIS, you don't have that information. On the other hand, you can have nice texture on it. You can have, the polygon mesh, which will go fast through the graphic pipeline. You don't have that rich semantics with OpenGIS. So we want to get benefits of these both sides in a city platform that we are creating. So that's why we are using mainly the IFC to get the rich semantics in the city as well. And plus, like I said, we are also using cesium and also GLTF. GLTF is also open standard geometry format. So in total, if you count, there are around 4 or 5 open solutions that we are experimenting with, also with LANC and other governments around the world. And those open sources or standards are coming into a single platform, and we're taking the advantages or the strengths of each platform depending on the use cases at the end. So what you're seeing here is the prototype. So a use case we have tested was the LANC, LANC department in Hong Kong. So if you see the buildings here, some of the buildings like this one is IFC, and IFC converted to GLTF. So if you click this, it's GLTF, which is very light, but it will also can also be linked to the rich semantics of the IFC model. Some of the buildings that you see here, the white ones, those are CityGML, and the landscape that you see here, the background is basically using 3D tiles and cesium technology to stream all that geometric data. And this is another side of that same platform. So this is the actual use case using all the open solutions I've mentioned. And here you are seeing the IFC model and querying against multiple buildings, not a single building, but multiple buildings. And because you're using IFC, you have all these properties that you see on the right side, and kind of see which floor it is, what the property of the material is. And you can do the query based on the query statement that you build with this website. So that's pretty straightforward in terms of building the query. And this is a 4D simulation. Another use case was the same type of platform. And for instance, let's say you are a government person, for instance, infrastructure planner. You might want to predict, all kinds of demands in the next 5 years or 10 years. You have, do we have enough job growth in the city? Do we have enough supply of energy, enough utility lines in the city, and so on? So when you have open standards platform on a city scale, this is something that can be potentially done. And the video that you just watched was actually sort of like a mock-up. This wasn't really operating back in 2020, early 2020. But then right now, we actually built this prototype into the platform that you saw. So it's no longer a mock-up, but this is actually an operating prototype today. So those are some of the actual use cases that we have been testing with the open platform. And next thing that we would like to do, and we are very much interested in, is connecting that OpenBIM and OpenGIS with IoT data sensors. But then the question is, can we do that by just using open standards? Probably you have seen a lot of use cases out there that does, digital twin with IoT data that shows you the sensor information through the interface. But the question that we have is, can we do that only using open solutions? And another question that we have is, can we also build the integration of the digital twin and IoT with infrastructure IPC objects, linked with CityGML objects as well? I say the answer is no at this point, because we kind of lack the data definition for those. So even if you see the IPC versions, we do have IPC 4.3, which does have definitions for infrastructure, but it's not really adopted in the industry yet. So linking IoT data with digital twin and expanding the domain to infrastructure, horizontal sector, is still a difficult task, but we hope to achieve that in near future. But like I said, IPC 4.3 is coming, and all those data definitions are either under development or recently published, IPC 4.3, for instance. And CityGML also previously did not have definitions for sensors, but in the upcoming CityGML 3.0, it does have the concept of the sensors. So that is also open GIS format. So in the future, we should be able to leverage that. So I think it's only a kind of matter of time, and we will soon, see OpenBIM and OpenGIS integrated with their own IoT definitions, and that domain can be extended to the horizontal sector, as you see here. Yep, and that's all I have for today.
Thank you, Dr. Song. So indeed, this is actively also contributing to the global community, working closely with infrastructure partners and audience in North America, in Europe, and also in Hong Kong, and also see what kind of experiences we can contribute back to the global community with the open standard platform of Building Smart International and the like. So, so that's the lineup. Martin, Florence.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. This is a good range of topics and very, very helpful and relevant. I'm actually curious about just now what Dr. Song was mentioning, that this open source BIM and also OpenGIS in the city's development. You were saying that there are still some challenge in implementing it. Can you share with us what kind of challenges, or what are the topics that are prohibiting it from moving forward?
I think one of the recent documents from Lens Department is called BIM harmonization. And it's a guideline to help you to harmonize different formats of a 3D model, including BIM. And that title actually tells you what the challenge is. It's difficult to harmonize. You have different authors, you have different native formats, you have different sources, and they also use different data definition. They have different ways of modeling. So how can we actually standardize that information specification? And also, can we build some kind of system that allows you to check whether the model that you're submitting or sending to the city meets the information specifications set forth by the government? So I think that's one of the key challenges that we have today. But there are other challenges, like, for instance, when you try to bring IPC model to city platform, it has to become light, because IPC itself is a very heavy model. So what Lansdy is also trying to do is convert that IPC format into CityGML and lower LOD from LOD 300 to perhaps like LOD 200, so that it can be light. But that conversion from IPC to CityGML, it's not ideal today. You can do it on a research level, but if you want to scale it up to multiple projects and to a city level, a lot of models are failing in terms of the conversion. So I guess that's one of the another challenge that we're seeing today.
Yeah, just a little more on that. Thanks for the great presentation about that. With digital twin, I'm old enough that I wanted to quote Jean Baudrillard from 1981, who predicted that the simulation and the real thing would be indistinguishable in terms of characteristics. And in a way, that's what we're trying to get to. But one of my questions is, how mature is the actual web-based technology that underlies this? Can it really handle the requisite amount of big data over the internet?
So it's very difficult if it's a desktop app. I think the situation is better. We have more computational resources if you have desktop. If you're streaming the data, the amount of data that you can stream is limited. So we are using a lot of tricks. So for instance, you cannot really stream IFC because it's heavy over the internet. So when we are streaming the geometry, we try to use a light format like GLTF instead of IFC. But when a certain person clicks on this model, it may pop up a smaller window that only will pick this single building and show the IFC of that building. So the web-based technology, I guess, in terms of bandwidth, it cannot provide all the data at the same time, but there are these little tricks that we try to use to overcome that.
And building upon what Dr. Sung just mentioned, indeed, we were also working with the Lands Department of Hong Kong to think about scalability and open scale. We actually did benchmark how other countries like Singapore, like Germany, like the Netherlands are doing, handling city scale data. And the other idea, so exactly, I think Dr. Song talked about the supply and the demand problem. How can we manage the demand? What stream of information do you need? How do we stream? How do we bring it just in time, just enough for the audience? Data is not that much of a problem. Geometry certainly is. And on the other hand, we're also trying that on vertical scale. Perhaps in the future webinar, we can also invite one of our ongoing client, which is the ICC building in Hong Kong. We're also working on the digital twin of the whole ICC tower. Sure, not the scale of the whole Hong Kong, but still 3 million square feet and a KPF design, and how to also bring the live data and the sensor to it. And so far, we're able to load those data, whether we are talking about part of Hong Kong, Netherlands, Estonia, or the ICC, quite efficiently, even just using a phone, using a typical device, even using just 4G. So I think it's a good problem. And we did also have Landsd to benchmark some of those performance and see what may be the future criteria for some of those scalable solutions.
We have a question from the floor, from Serena. Can this 4D matrix be able to inform how to better design buildings, city planning in consideration of the COVID cases spreading in buildings and between buildings now in Hong Kong?
That's a good way. Maybe if I can ask my colleague, for example, can Dr. Lee, please help me to show maybe a closing slide. And thank you, Serena, for posting that question. Indeed, if there's a closing diagram we want to show is that we certainly can use digital design and solution to help us make any projects better with deliverable, get good funding, make sure that we're on budget, on time. Yet, can we elevate that to think about accountability? Yet the BIM and the digital deliverable, can that last for longer term single source of truth, for property management, for city planner? And then for transparency, Jim and Tony talk about trust, talk about building consensus, talk about procurement. Martin asked about the good questions about procurement. We need to elevate digital practice to make it transparent, to make it the next level will be prosperity, improving productivity. We've been advising the Singapore government for 10 years or so, and it's about productivity. Yet at the same time, it's also about our workforce. It's about equity, which is also what AIA is a lot about. But to what Serena talked about, it's also about resiliency. Absolutely. I think like we have seen that the Lands Department, it's using a lot of its 2D map services to map COVID around Hong Kong. And now can we leverage the BIM, the 3D, to try to help architects and designers and engineers alike to better understand how we can better prevent COVID spread. Just like I still remember working with the Finland government 20 years ago, how we could really leverage some of those computational fluid dynamics to simulate how airflow within the building or microclimate. So there's definitely so much we can do because of climate change, because of what AIA is also about. We need to think about resiliency and how to cope with this pandemic.
Yeah.
So thank you, Serena, for the question.
Yeah, thank you. Martin, do you have any more thoughts you want to?
It's been a really a wide-ranging and great presentation. I mean, there are many questions. It's not going to be a session that is completed in that sense, but I guess what I notice in offices is that there seems to be some still barriers to adoption. What do you think are the main barriers to further adoption? It showed in your earlier graphs. What do offices today have to do to get the value?
Start and end with the mindset. Like the pluses and delta, try not to give tons of excuses, tons of reasons, a ton of challenges. Try to start with the bright side, the plus side. We have seen whether it may be a small firm globally or a small firm in Hong Kong, that if they have the right mindset, commit to it, certainly they can even see return on investment within one project cycle. I still remember another award winner from various AIA Innovation Awards. Several architects was able to report that they were able to reduce unnecessary email by 50%. So who wake up every day say that I'm so happy today because I'm expecting 500 emails, right? So emails, a lot of those are really not value adding. So it has been proven with Martin, many of your projects over the years, that even with technology from 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, BIM digital practice can prove to be of value, can prove to bring good impacts to collaboration, to design, and to the sustainability of our environment. So I would say start and end with the mindset. And then if I could also quote Tom Friedman, to think big, start small, and act now.
Think big. Great. And maybe we'll take one last question from Ying Kwok. Thank you for the informative presentation. Which country or city has a more developed digital twins technology in civil building projects performance? How the government of the country or city helps in terms of setting up new regulations and incentive contributing to this result?
We certainly have been scanning and looking into over 20 countries of applications. I wonder if Tony or Jim, you may want to share a little bit about what we see with Scandinavia, for example. In short, we don't see any one country may have the perfect recipe. There's so much we can learn from different approach, Americans, British, European, Australian, Asian ones. But Tony, anything to share along those lines?
Well, if you're specifically interested in scanning, one of the things that scanning can help us do is get a computable picture of the real world very, very rapidly without investing in the time that it takes to construct models by hand. So this can be an excellent locus for any kind of additional information that we may want to visualize. Also, just while my mic is open, Martin, you asked about how we can overcome barriers, and Calvin pointed us to mindset. One of the most important barriers that we find is people can be frightened of tools that they don't understand, or they can be threatened by tools that they're expected to use, but they're not comfortable using. So education is hugely important, both at the conceptual level, like what we can get from the AIA and Building Smart, and at the more practical level, like what we can get from many training organizations and even in some cases vendors. So I just wanted to get that in while my mic was open.
Okay, it's almost 1:35 now. Any more questions from the floor before we close it? Okay, so I want to thank you again, our speakers for today. It has been a real pleasure listening not just on the technology on BIM, but also some more fundamental ways of thinking about collaborations, about how we should overcome our own mental barriers, how the mindset of the plus and delta, hopefully all the audience can take away from this meeting. And also like strong teammates make a strong team. I mean, AIA cannot be like surviving like now without all these like strong leaders and audience like yourself to support our works. So thank you everyone for today's joining the webinar. And thank you again for Calvin, for Tony, for who else? Jim, John, Ming, Joy, Kyla, and also Martin for today's wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Florence. Thank you,
Yeah.
Martin.
Okay.
Stay safe to
Yep.
those in Hong Kong and around the world.
Yes, everyone stay safe. Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.